Hello there everybody, and thanks for joining me for this live stream. I'm digital artist Aaron Rutten, and I'm going to be painting today with Corel Painter 2018 and a Wacom Cintiq 27. And the topic for this painting is going to be a solar eclipse. So, I'll go ahead and start painting. I actually have an idea this time. As if you've watched me before in live streams, you know that I'll start this thing and I don't even know what I'm going to do. So this will be a rare treat for you. I'm going to select a dark blue color and start with that. So, because a solar eclipse is fairly simple to paint, and obviously it's not going to take me very long to paint, I'm also going to include some sort of, I guess you would call it a foreground, but objects around it in the composition. Zach's here. Good to see you, Zach. Good to see you, Snowy the Bear. But Snowy's got to go return some books. Well, hopefully I'll still be here when you get back. Okay, so that layer is going to be the sky. Now, gotta have something in the sky. So we'll put in some color here, some bluish colors. Something like that. And then we need to have our circular shape here in the center. Now the solar eclipse is happening, I believe, I think it's on the 21st. I had it pulled up and then I had to restart my computer, so now I look dumb. Yes, August 21st, which is a Monday for some people. I guess for everybody. Except for those people who are like, Monday is my Friday. So we got our big dark spot there, and then behind it, I'm gonna make kind of a lighter bluish color like this. And size my brush about the size of that dark spot in the center. And just wiggle my pen around. Actually, I'll switch to the old Elgato so you can see what I'm doing here. So I'm wiggling my... Whoa, way too much pressure there. It's out of control. That's what happens when I switch screens. Going right in the center and just wiggling my pen. You can see that little motion on my hand. I was just doing a little wiggle there. But you only need a little bit at a time. You could also use a smaller brush to go along the edge like this, because it can be a little irregular. Essentially, the sun is being blocked here, and so you want to imagine the outer edges of the sun. You know, there's all these solar flares and different things. Let's call that layer glow. Switch back so you can see me here. So for me, let's do a quick shout out. How many of you live in an area where you can see the solar eclipse? Because for me, I'm in Seattle, and so I'd have to go to Oregon in order to be able to see it. Using a brighter, more green color there for the edge. And then I'm just going to I didn't really practice this ahead of time, so this is just going to be me experimenting here. I have a general idea of how I want it to look. But what brushes I want to use? I mean, there's just so many brushes. I don't even know what to choose. Thinking I might try a particle brush first. This one is called Flow Flare. Let's see if it'll even get big enough to even get off of there. Well, what I'll do is I'm going to paint with it. Actually, I'll just set it to a default layer. Move it up there so you can see it. What we'll have to do is we'll have to paint it here, and we'll have to transform it to scale it larger. Let's try something like that. And then we'll move it back behind the darkness there. Now I'm going to zoom out a bit. And I'm going to go to Effects, Focus, Zoom Blur. And we'll just be patient here. As you can see up there, it says now applying zoom blur. So because this is live, I can't really speed this up or cut this out like I would do in my tutorials. Come on, zoom blur, you can do it. Don't you hate when the progress bar, you know, it makes you wait and then it goes all the way to the end and then it stops and it just hangs there for a minute? It's like, what's the deal with that? Alright, and then we have to wait again because I want to increase the amount of zoom blur. You know, I should just do this in Photoshop. No, I guess I have to wait. Well, I guess it's a good time to catch up on comments. James is here. Good to see you, James. Moesio is here. Milky's here. Liern is here. Are you done yet, zoom blur? Come on, zoom blur. You're killing me here. There we go. Click on OK. And that gave us a nice blurry effect there. I think that looks pretty good. So now I might maybe add another layer. And see how we can enhance this here. Oh, what else would be nice? Maybe a Sargent knife. Let's see, where is that Sargent knife? There it is. One of these Sargent brushes that uses the new liquid drip. Not that bright. Well, it's up to you how simple you want to get with these things. You know, I certainly could have stopped, and I don't have to add this extra detail, but I think it might be kind of fun. So that's creating kind of a solar flare effect. I'll blur that a little bit. Let's switch to the old El Gato. So you can see my hand dance here. You can see I'm kind of swiveling and doing these different contoured strokes here. So I want all the flames to kind of radiate outward, but they're going to be kind of flamey at the same time. That was a Pauly Shore move right there. Flamage. Oh, something like that's working pretty well. Taking my time here on this. Savoring it. I'll do another layer. And I'm liking that brush. So I'll keep using it. Ian's here. Good to see you, Ian. IG Designing. Sam Reeves is here. Good to see you, Sam. So I didn't see anybody comment in and say that they were going to be able to see the Eclipse. I'm not going to be seeing it. Andre's here. Good to see you, Andre. Thanks for the compliment. Ian says particle brushes would be cool here. Yes, indeed. There's just, I have so many brushes at this point, it's hard to decide which brushes to use, you know, because you can get the same effect, or I guess it's not the same effect. There's a lot of different ways to express something, not just, you know, genre-wise or style-wise, but with a particular kind of brush, you know, like I could use so many different brushes to create a glowing effect around this solar eclipse. But then it's, you know, it's like trying to figure out which brushes to choose. You almost have brush overkill sometimes. Makes it hard to decide, but, you know, I just kind of do it based on how I feel at the time. I'll blend that a little bit more. There's some brushes that I almost always use. This diffuse blur is one of them. Digital airbrush is one of them. And if I overdo any of that stuff, I can always reduce the opacity as well. Let's try that. Zooming out is always helpful too. Just balancing out my layers a bit. And then our dark area here from our moon blocking the sun is going to have to be converted. So I guess I can just right click on that and choose convert to default layer. And I'll blur that a bit with effects, focus, soften. It doesn't need to have a really hard edge. Something like something like that will work. Go ahead and just name these layers too. That way I know what they are. White balance is going nuts on my camera here. Let me fix that. Gotta fix my white balance, everybody. Thought I set that ahead of time. What happened is my... Whoa, I'm way too red now. What happened is I had this kind of set up ahead of time and then my webcam was not working the way I wanted it to. There we go, that's better. Alright. What else to add to this? I think it needs a little more glow. So I'm going to use the glow brush. That's what it was missing. The edge being very, very bright. Liren wants to know what webcam do I use. I use the Logitech Brio. It's a 4K webcam, so it's very high resolution. Works pretty well. It's just today I'm having some issue with it that I don't normally have. And it's only wanting to stream in, it's only wanting to capture video in 1080, which is fine. Normally I would use 1440p, but I didn't have time to try to figure out what was wrong with it. It probably would have been as easy as just unplugging it and plugging it back into a different USB port, but I was already kind of running behind, and so I didn't want to make you wait any longer. Figured it didn't matter, you know? Alex Draws is here. See you later, Fox Quinn. Good to see you. Sam said they had the same problem with their Logitech C922. You know, the one thing I don't like, and it might just be a problem with all webcams, is they don't save your settings. So every time I turn my computer off and I, you know, try to record a video with the webcam or try to live stream, end up having to reset the white balance and the focus and the exposure, and there's just, you know, extra steps that I have to do for no reason at all. Should just be able to save the settings. But just as well, even with my expensive camera that I'm using connected to the Elgato, that doesn't really save all your preferences either. It saves some of them, just not all of them, and so I have to go in each time and manually set things again. It makes it kind of a hassle, because it would be nice to just turn on a camera and then just have it work exactly the same every time. If you don't pay attention to things like that, then you record a video and then all of a sudden, you know, your green screen doesn't work because your white balance was off, and then it's not good. Samuel's here. Good to see you, Samuel. Okay, so I think more or less I am pretty happy with this so far. Just wonder if there's anything else I should add to it. Yeah, I might try this and we'll see how it looks. Do something I don't do that often, and that's tweak one of these brushes. That might be alright. Let's see. Let's try that and see how that will work. Looks like I'm not doing anything here, but I'm making that flare effect again. And if I scale it up, you'll be able to see it better. Let's see if that looks cool. Kind of interesting. I don't know that I like it necessarily. Oops. Yeah, go to the layer that I want. Add auto select layer on. Try this too. That's kind of cool. Not necessarily terribly realistic, but it's kind of an interesting effect. Again, this is just me kind of experimenting here. And then the good thing about working digitally is you can look at the before and after and you can see whether or not you like it. Let's say I don't like it like that. So I'm going to try again with a different effect here. Oftentimes you see these kind of wispy tails that come off of this. So I'm just trying to think of a good way to do that that would be practical. And then I'll try blending these a bit. Let's see if I like this better. Blending in the direction that those rays are going out. Let's see how it's looking. It's a bit closer to what I wanted. All right, getting closer. I know this seemed like a really simple project, and then it's taking me quite a bit of time to do. But sometimes that's just how it is. Some things that seem like they're really simple, once you break them down and actually look at them in detail, you start to see that they're not really that simple after all. And I'm just going to do something I don't normally do, and that's rotate my canvas a bit. For something like this angle, it's kind of hard for me to draw at that angle on the Cintiq. Okay, put that right side up again. Now what to add in front of it, that's the question. Just a little bit of glow spilling over there. That'll help it look more realistic. I think Ian had to go. See you later, Ian. I'm just catching up on comments here. Somebody had a question, David had a question about the job market for digital artists. I think digital art is one of those things. I mean, if you want to get hired by a company, you know, I can't necessarily speak for that because I'm a freelance digital artist, but as far as being freelance, it doesn't really take much to do that. I mean, if you can make art, you know, then you can essentially have a business. You just have to be able to get work on your own, and that's not terribly hard to do. You know, you could advertise lots of different ways. I don't know if you have like a local Craigslist equivalent or some sort of like forum where you can post, you know, ads and things and say, hey, I do this service, you know, this is my rate. You could also set up, you know, there's like websites like Freelancer and lots of other websites where you can advertise and get work. I'm not saying it's easy to do because it does take a lot of work, and I guess you do have to be pretty, you don't have to like go take business classes or anything, but you have to at least have some idea of how to run a business. And that's something you can make up as you go along, but point being, through a lot of different ways you can get work, and you know, sometimes that's easier than trying to get hired somewhere. Sam wants to know, do I think a YouTube channel is essential or even helps significantly for a freelance digital artist? Yes, I think I'm almost leaning towards saying that digital artists should have a YouTube channel. I mean, there's no reason not to, unless you just don't care and it's not your goal and you don't feel like it would benefit you. But if you're looking to get more exposure for your work, then yes, you should have a YouTube channel, because YouTube is it's a very, very large audience that's very easy to reach if you do it the right way. I mean, that doesn't mean that anybody can set up a YouTube channel and have success with it. You know, I see lots of people who are very, very talented, very successful artists who already have a name for themselves can, you know, barely get subscribers on YouTube. And so you get out of it what you put into it. And some people feel like they're putting a lot into it and aren't getting anything out of it. Well, that's probably because they're not putting in the right things the right way, or they're not doing enough of it. You have to stick to it for a while. You know, if I'd have continued on based on my very first initial views and you know, feedback that I got on my channel, I barely got any comments on my first, you know, handful of videos. Barely got any views. It's not like that many people, you know, subscribed immediately or anything. And if I'd have just gone, oh, well, gee, I didn't get 10,000 views in a day, I better just give up, then, you know, I wouldn't be here today. So I would do it, record everything that you draw. It's not hard to do, and there you go. At a bare minimum, you can make speed paintings of your work. David wants to know, from my experience, have I ever met someone, or do I know someone who is not in art education and still managed to learn to become a good artist while having a full-time job aside? Somebody who's not already professionally an artist who could learn to become, I'm trying to think of, I mean, I know there's lots of people who, you know, I guess kind of what you're asking is if you can be a successful artist and still have a full-time job, and I think yes and no. I think there's probably a lot of people who end up being successful because they tend to phase out the full-time job. But I'm sure there are people out there who do it, but it's probably a lot more difficult than if you were, you know, if you didn't have a full-time job, because the full-time job, that takes up a lot of your time. So that's time that you need to practice to get good at art, and it doesn't mean that you can't do it. It just, I think it means that you need to be more selective and more strict about how you use your time when you do have free time. Because I can say from experience, starting out, I wasn't just born a professional artist. You know, I had to have a job. I wouldn't say by any means that I was, you know, it was a full-time job. Like, it wasn't the kind of job that was like taking over every hour of my life, but it did interfere with me being able to make art. But what I did in my free time, and everybody has, or most people have free time that have full-time jobs, on my days off, some of what I would do would involve making art, and that was enough. You know, it's not like I had to sit down and practice for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week to get good at art. You know, I learned things that I didn't know before, such as digital painting and graphic design and website design and layouts and Photoshop and Illustrator and all these things. I learned that stuff piece by piece, a small piece at a time, in between having to work and having to have a normal life. The difference and why I'm more successful at it now is because as I had success doing those things and doing creative work, it became less and less necessary for me to have that full-time job. And so that full-time job became a part-time job. And then that part-time job, you know, was no longer a job. I just didn't do it anymore because I knew that I could get enough work to sustain myself. But, you know, if you have a family to support and you have house payments and car payments and all those things, quitting your full-time job is it's kind of a dangerous gamble. And, you know, you're not going to instantly go from, you know, not being a professional artist to like just deciding one day you're going to be a professional and making the same amount of money you were making at your full-time job. You're probably going to take a hit and you're going to have to do the starving artist thing to some degree, but you know, it's up to you the way you want to do it. There's lots of different ways to go about it, and I think regardless of your situation, you can make it work as long as you're dedicated and focused. Long rambling answer. Okay, I promise I'll start painting again. So I want to add something to this composition. You know, it could be like a small mountain range or something. I don't know. Maybe just some stars would be cool. Let's do some stars. I think that would look nice. Just gonna keep track of my layers here. Okay, let's put in some stars. Now I'm using a brush called Pepper Spray. As you might imagine, it sprays out little flecks, little speckles. You can control the size of those speckles with the feature setting. So we want fewer big speckles and lots of tiny speckles. I don't want the stars to be too dominant in this piece, so I'm just going to do a few. That might even be too many. Let's do that again. And you get to see me do it twice, for practice sake. Even that's too many. If you find that you're getting way too many per stroke, you can set the flow lower. I'm going to set my flow to 10. That's better. Set my feature back to 2. Okay, I like that a lot better. Zoom in so you can see it a bit there. Whoa. So I might experiment with adding something here in the foreground now. Could see how it might look to maybe put some leaves or something in front of this. I'm using an image hose nozzle here that I created. I'm just making sure this is nice and filled in back here. Kind of looks cool. I don't know. Don't know how I feel about it. Leon says a city silhouette and some civilians looking at it. Subtle but gives perspective, says Ashley. You know what might help is if I put it out of focus. Yeah, that's better. Because if you're focused on the solar eclipse, you're not looking at the stupid trees next to it. That's better. Because also, I made it kind of big. It's kind of really dominating the composition. I could take the whole thing and try to shrink it down, but then I'm going to have some edges that are cut off. If I was going to do a city, it would probably need to be a lot smaller in proportion to the city. I wanted to do a big one this time. I'm actually going to maybe do a few solar eclipse paintings, just leading up to the actual event, because I think they're kind of fun. I'm interested in astronomy. It'd be nice to be able to go see it, but it sounds like a pretty crazy thing. I don't know if I'd want to be around that many people and potentially get stuck in traffic for a long time, and it just sounds like a zoo. Lucas likes the trees. Thank you, Lucas. Oh, Prissa can't watch the stream. Well, it will be recorded, so you'll be able to watch it later. You just won't be able to see it live, but you know, you're not missing out on much if you don't watch it live. It's all the same. What else to add to it? I know, let's add some color effects. This is just giving it a bit of flavor. Doing these color overlays, it really helps to kind of unify the colors in your piece. I'm going to add a mask to that layer and fill the mask with black. I'll switch to white and I'll use the airbrush to bring back in some of that yellowish color. And then here in the center, I want to make sure that it just stays nice and dark. So I have that light spilling over the edge just a little too much, so I'm just kind of taming it down there. It's looking pretty good so far. Lucas says, do I use the magic wand tool? Very rarely. I would probably use it more for image editing if I was trying to select something in Photoshop. You can see now that these leaves are too green. But no, I don't typically use it for painting. It's not a very accurate tool, and it leaves weird jagged edges, which are no good. fading out that green color on the leaves there. Maybe add a dead tree over on the other side too. We can see how that might look. I'm going to apply that layer mask. Just naming my layers here so that I know what they are. Always good to name your layers. I'm going to switch to my Wacom art pen. It'll give me a little more control over how I draw these shapes here. Actually, I think what I'll do just to make it easier on myself, make my tree in a color that I'm not necessarily going to keep. So what I mean by that is I'm going to paint it lighter and then I'll just make it darker later. Doing some little branches here on this tree. We'll have one more kind of come up this way too. You know, it might be the angle of view is the person's kind of looking up at the sky, so you're kind of seeing a little bit of the underside of the tree. So that's kind of what I'm going for here with this angle. I'm going to zoom in on that a little bit. Oops, that wasn't the zoom. I'm going to zoom in on that a little bit. And I can really get in here and focus on these branches. The more branches you do, the more detail you're going to have to put in later if you want to go through and shade each of these branches. So just keep that in mind. Need some branches that overlap too, otherwise your tree is going to look flat. Drawing this tree is going to take me more time than the entire rest of the painting, I think. But I have to add stuff to this composition because if I'm going to do more than one Eclipse painting, there has to be some difference, and then they can't all just be the same Eclipse. So maybe this will be the Eclipse as viewed from different places. I'll put different objects in each scene. It's kind of relaxing drawing all these branches. It's one of those things you can just do and you don't have to think too much about it. And there's a general formula that you follow for branches. They're typically wider at their base and they get thinner as they move away from the branch or the trunk. There's usually kind of forking patterns that make little Y and V shapes. These trees are fractals. a lot of things are fractals, and so it helps to really know what fractals are and how they're created in nature. So clouds are fractals, leaves are fractals, rocks are fractals. I'm not necessarily just talking about like computer-generated fractals like the Mandelbrot set. I'm talking about fractals in nature specifically. Coastlines are fractals, you know. It's pretty amazing how fractals are all around us. The way I'm painting this is very fractal too, because I started out with some big branches that were essentially the same pattern that I'm following for the smaller branches, and then off of those big branches I'm putting that exact same pattern, just smaller. I could spend all day putting these branches on this tree, but I don't think I'll do that. I want to take that and convert it to a default layer. I'll just make it darker. That looks nice. I didn't expect to get that reflection on it, but that actually makes it look pretty cool. That's what Bob Ross calls happy accidents. That was a very good happy accident there. I like that. I might even tint over that a little bit, just to darken it. It's kind of cool. It's like you're in the woods and you're looking up through the forest canopy, and there's the eclipse. I'm not sure what the original comment is about using the pen and the mouse. Liam says he uses the mouse, or holds the pen and grabs the mouse with the same hand. It's also what I do. Like, I have my pen in my hand at all times. And then, let's switch to the Elgato. Let me see if I can show you with that. That's my cable. Oh no! Whew. I pulled on something and it unplugged a cable on my TV, and it turned off. Okay, I'm not going to do that. That is a bad idea. I don't want to mess anything up. So, how else can I show you? Oh, I have another mouse. Not the same kind of mouse. Okay, so even if I were using this kind of mouse, I would hold the mouse like this, and I would still have my pen here between my fingers, and I could still click. Now what I'm using is I'm using a trackball, so I'm moving the trackball with my finger, and I don't know if that really makes much of a difference in how you use the mouse, but yeah, you can hold them together. It just takes a bit of practice. You might think, well, if you have the pen, why do you need the mouse? And some people do navigate entirely with the mouse, but if you have multiple screens, or some people do navigate entirely with the pen, but if you have multiple screens, as I do, then the pen is only going to work on one screen. So it's necessary for me to have a mouse. Some things are just easier to do with a mouse as well. They're more precise. Sometimes it can get fatiguing too to have to hold your arm up to a Cintiq to be constantly clicking on every single little menu in addition to drawing. David's never had a graphics tablet, and that's why there's newbie questions. That's totally fine. That's what we're here for. You might also, after the live stream, just have a look around my channel for some of my beginners digital art tutorials, because a lot of them go over some of that really basic beginner stuff that you probably wouldn't think to ask, but I get so many questions that I've kind of compiled it all. And yes, Ashley's right, we were all newbies once. That's why this channel exists, because, you know, when I was getting started with digital art, there wasn't a whole lot of information out there, at least not that I could find. So I wanted to create some resources for people. Which I think in my case was good for me, because then I got to develop my own techniques, you know. I mean, nothing is really original technique-wise. We're all copying, you know, somebody. We're all using the same basic principles of making art, which are based on observation of life. But to translate some things digitally, you know, techniques that you would do traditionally into digital, I feel like I've found lots of ways to do that that are kind of my own, and other people wouldn't think to paint that way. And that's kind of the fun thing about working digitally. You know, I was talking earlier, there's 10 or 20 different ways I could have done the glowing stuff surrounding my Eclipse here. I could have used all kinds of different brushes. It's really up to me to decide, you know, which one fits the style the best. And there's a lot of room to experiment, you know. There's not one way to do something digitally. There's lots of different ways to do it. Okay, so that tree should be out of focus too a bit. Oops. Messed up my window there. What's going on here? This is craziness. Get back there, window. FX focus soften is what I want. And I think I still have a selection active. Yes, I do, so I need to deselect that first. And then soften it. So this might be a bit more in focus. Yeah, that looks nice. Looking good. I want to make this you know, a longer live stream. So I'll continue adding to this. Little fine details could certainly be skipped. Might not even be able to see them, but I'm going to put them in. I'll put in some little glowing stars here. I'm basically just making the stars that I already put in glow, I should say. And this just helps them look more clearly like they're stars, and that way you know it's not snow or something, or dust. You don't have to do them all. In space, some stars are closer to us and some stars are further away. So the ones that are closer will be more noticeable and have bigger glows. And just to add contrast up against this branch, I'm going to make this one really glow. There's another nice big one there. I'm just finishing up a new course on how to paint a seascape, which will be out at the end of the month. That ought to be pretty fun for those of you who like to take my landscape painting courses. If you don't know about my landscape painting courses, you can check those out at aaronrutten.com. There's actually a little link down there at the bottom of the screen. Go to my website and check out my Corel Painter courses. People have been able to follow along with them using other software too, such as ArtRage. So, you know, even if you don't want to buy a course, there's a free landscape painting crash course on there, and it was made with Corel Painter, but again, people have followed it with ArtRage, and so I think a lot of the principles that are there can be applied to just about any software application that lets you create art. Because a lot of the principles are just, you know, they're overall principles of light and color and form and texture, and so it doesn't really matter what software you're working with. You could even be painting on a traditional canvas and you'd still be able to use a lot of those principles. A little one hiding over here in the trees. Okay. Zoom out a bit. Now I think this one I overdid, so I'm just going to redo it. It just stood out and didn't look right to me. Sometimes things look really good up close and then you zoom out and they don't look good. I think there's too many. I did too many. Let's do that. I'll just erase a couple of them. That looks better. You know, sometimes part of a composition involves thinking really hard about where you're going to place things. You know, like if I put in too many stars, all of a sudden people are going to be looking at the stars. They're not going to be looking at the eclipse. Same goes for the trees. If those are too in focus, people will be looking at the trees and thinking, am I supposed to look at the trees? Are the trees the most important thing, or is the eclipse the most important thing? And that's kind of what a photographer does when a photographer chooses focus on a subject. You can do the same thing in your paintings using contrast or softening things or lighting them a certain way or arranging them a certain way on the canvas. Milky says, stars brighter than my future. I don't know about that. I think your future is brighter than these stars. You gotta be optimistic. That's really the one thing that you can do that is free, and it doesn't take any time to learn it, and it can have instant effects on your life. Just be optimistic. You know, lots of people have obstacles. I've had plenty of obstacles and continue to have obstacles, and I think if you want to persevere as an artist and be successful, you just have to try to be creative and work around those things. You know, treat those obstacles like you would treat a painting. Use your imagination and work out solutions. That's what you're good at. You're creative, and I think if you can find creative solutions to artwork or creative problems, you can find solutions to, you know, get whatever it is you want to get out of life. Jane wants to know if I have a favorite way of developing a given work. I mean, I do so many different styles and things, you know, and like how I would approach a landscape is different than how I would approach a portrait or a still life. But overall, I think what's most important for me is to be able to break things down into their individual components. So when I look at something, if I'm studying a still life, I look at the shape, the form, the texture, the color, the line. You know, I look at all of the different, you could consider them to be the elements of art, you know, space. And when you can look at things that way, it makes it a lot easier to break down an object and draw it realistically, or to analyze something so that you can make an accurate representation of it. And I kind of did that ahead of time here with the eclipse. I looked at a few photos, and essentially in my imagination, sure, I know that an eclipse is just a dark spot on the sky with some light stuff surrounding it in a halo, but I hadn't ever really studied it in more detail than that, enough to like really look at a couple of photos and go, oh, okay, I see the different patterns that are made, and you know, oh, you can see the stars in the background, and depending on how you photograph it, you get different results. You know, depending on the time of day, you get different results. And got inspiration about putting things in the foreground and stuff like that I might not have thought of. So, you know, it really just helps to be able to break things down. And I think if you can translate that into working digitally, the best way to do that is to create a lot of layers. And during this painting, I created layers as I went along. But oftentimes, if I'm doing a still life and I've already spent that time analyzing it, I'll already have a good idea of like what layers I need, and I'll create, you know, maybe 10 or 20 layers ahead of time, stack them all in the order that they should go in, label them all, and then I'll start painting based on that. And so in nearly all of my paintings, I'll use a lot of layers in that way. Whether I create them ahead of time or while I'm working, I still use a lot of layers. There are a few exceptions, you know, like there's some paintings where I don't use a lot of layers, but there's reasons for that. You know, sometimes time is a factor. Layers take up a lot of time, but they also save a lot of time in the long run for something that's really complex. Milky says rule of thirds is key. And just to, we'll elaborate on the rule of thirds. Now, the rule of thirds is an aesthetic principle of art that says if you want something to look good, then you should arrange it in a certain way on your canvas. Now, if you don't know what the rule of thirds is, you probably want to start intentionally using it. You know, when you plot out a composition, maybe you want to force yourself to use the rule of thirds first. I didn't do that here. I didn't start out with a grid, and I can show you in Corel Painter. I can make a grid here. Let's make it some colors that you can see. There's a rule of thirds grid. It's called the rule of thirds because you have 3 columns and 3 rows. And so I've just done enough compositions to where I'll just do it automatically. You know, it's really kind of an intuition thing. There's some obvious places where you wouldn't want to put objects in your composition. You know, like it wouldn't make sense to have my main focal point here being the Eclipse. If I had that way up in this corner, it just would look strange, unless it was really small and there was a lot going on in these other areas. So I have it center. It's not dead center. It's a little bit off center, and that's fine. My tree kind of takes up this column here. This other tree takes up this column here, and there you go. There's your very, very basic composition. You know, I've concentrated more of my brighter stars in this area. There's a few brighter ones here. That one's dead center, you know. You can really, once you start to see the rule of thirds, you start to see that nearly all of these areas could be their own individual photographs and compositions. And the content that's framed within them is framed in a way that is aesthetically pleasing. So I do that automatically. This is also a very subjective thing, so you could look at this and say you don't like the way I arranged it, and that doesn't mean that I'm right or you're wrong or vice versa. It just means that, you know, there's some obvious things in art, and some things just don't look right, and some things look good, and they can be quantified or distilled down into a principle such as the rule of thirds, but it's really probably stuff that you're going to do automatically anyways, because it's common sense. Michelle says they have trouble remembering to click on the proper layer before painting. That's where labeling your layers really comes in handy. Sure, I didn't do it for every single layer in this painting, but in many of my paintings I do, and that's why it helps to create the layers ahead of time, because then you're thinking about layers, and you're more aware of what's on that layer. If I don't name my layer, like this layer 8 here, I don't know what this is, I have to turn it on and off to see that it's something that was covering my dark area. So maybe I'll call it shadow. And this is the dead tree. I'll name it dead tree. Now there's no question about it. I know exactly what's on this layer. Where's my stars layer? Oh, I don't have to hunt around for a bunch of layers. I just look here and I go, okay, there's my stars. You know, and if you want to group layers together, that's even better, because that stars had a glow layer that accompanied it, and so now I can hide both of those at the same time. And will you forget now and then to click on the right layer? Probably yes. There's going to be things that you're going to forget over and over and over again, but each time you forget, it's going to reinforce the right way to do it. And so don't be afraid to make mistakes. Just try to learn from them. There's things I forget to do all the time when I'm working, like selections. If I hide a selection and I start trying to paint after I'm done with it on some other part of the layer, then I'm, you know, looking at this computer going, hey, why can't I paint over here? And then I realize, oh yeah, selection's still active. Okay, so I'm trying to think about what else to do to this piece. I might just start something new. I'm going to go ahead and save this, because I think this is alright how it is. You know what I think might be fun, actually, right before I do that? Let's see, which layer am I looking for? I think I want these. Hey, we could even make an animation. Check it out. Whoa! I was thinking maybe I'd have it over just a little bit so it looked like it was almost right at the eclipse point. But no, I think after seeing it, I think I'm alright with it just being about where it was. So I'll save it, and let's draw some other stuff. I'll answer some more questions too. What else do we want to draw today? I could do another eclipse, but I'm kind of eclipsed out, I think, for now. You know, I'll talk a little more about composition. Quality animation right there, says Leon. I'll turn that layout grid back on. So, just to talk a little bit more about composition, you know, if I was going to do a landscape, then I would, you know, maybe have my, let's switch to a color we can see here. I might have my horizon line like right here, and then let's say it's, you know, some kind of road off in the distance or something. It hangs out on that side, and then over here there's a forest, and then, I don't know, big tall tree here. But it doesn't mean that everything has to be right within these squares, or these quadrants, or whatever you want to call them. You can also have things that run along them. So for example, there could be a tree that goes right along here, and then, you know, maybe some smaller ones or something. And so it's, you know, it's not a rule that you always have to use, but it's there. If you don't know what it is, definitely get familiar with it. And if you're already doing it automatically, then don't worry about, you know, doing it before you start every painting. I mean, you certainly can if you want to, and it depends on the piece and how much I care about it being absolutely as close to perfect in my mind as it can be. You know, like if it's just some quick doodle, like it's just a still life or something, I might not really care about how I have it composed, because I know the background might not be that complex, and so if I need to move it around, I can do that later. If it's an entire landscape, I might think a little bit more about that, because it's more important to get things balanced out. So what to paint? Michelle wants to know if I've used the mixing palette. Yes, I can demonstrate that real quick using the broken paint, thick paint brush. So here's the mixer here. You can see I actually have already added some mixers. Mixer pad essentially works like a palette. You can put down colors. Let's say I want to put down this red, then put down the blue, and I can mix them together. And I can get intermediate colors. I don't really like to work that way because I think it's just a lot of extra steps to mix colors. For me personally, I would rather mix colors as I'm painting, so-called mixing on the canvas, as they would call it in traditional art, where I'll blend colors into colors, or I'll just pick whatever color I want. And you know, like I have a pretty good sense of color to where I don't need to really use the mixer. The exception being if I wanted to use sample multiple colors, and then actually I want to use thick palette knife, and then that'll let me paint strokes that contain multiple colors. So that's pretty fun. So that's about the only way I would do that. And then, you know, in a practical sense, you would use that to create like tree trunks and things where you don't want to have to draw the highlight and the shadow separately. Pretty fun. Michelle says, how do you mix on the canvas? Well, for example, let's say my base color is this gray. Well, here, let's get even closer to the example. I'm going to create a new layer, and let's say that this is going to be, sorry, this is going to be an orange or something, right? I'm going to turn on Preserve Transparency, which essentially allows me to only paint on the area of pixels that I put down here, so I can't paint on the transparent background when the pixels are locked. So I know that I'm going to have this as maybe my base color for my orange, and then I want some other oranges to blend into that, and I could even just use like a yellow and blend yellow into that orange, and then I'm getting all those intermediate colors together without having to select each of them or go into the mixer and do that. And if I wanted to break it up and make it a little more chunky, I could blend it. Let's use Oily Blender. You know, if I wanted there to be more firm transitions and texture and things like that. Lots of different blenders you could use to soften it or add contrast. So this is by no means a tutorial on how to paint an orange, because, you know, I'd do a better job than that. But it gives you an idea of how you can kind of blend and mix on the palette. You know, if I wanted the orange to be a little bit cooler, I could create a new layer. Right-click on that orange layer and choose Select Layer Content, which just puts a selection around that layer. On that extra layer I created, turn off Preserve Transparency. Set the composite method to multiply, which just controls how the paint blends with the paint underneath. If I wanted to add some purplish color for shadow, then I'm blending in color that way. And if I wanted to add a highlight on a separate layer, set that to Screen. Select kind of a yellowish color, I could blend in some of that and make it those nice transitions in color. So I'm letting the brushes create those transitions rather than having to mix them ahead of time. So a lot of my technique deals with painting efficiently, because that's important to me. You know, there's no sense in having a painting take a lot longer than it needs to. Alright, there's my orange. So hopefully that makes sense. Young Gamer's hi, what's up, Young Gamer? I'm going to go ahead and just merge these layers. And some kind of dinosaur worm now. Alright, delete that. So what should I paint? I got, you know, maybe another 45 minutes or so that I'll do this stream. Feel free to suggest something. Also, if you've been enjoying this live stream and you want to give me incentive to do more live streams like this, definitely consider doing a super chat. Super chat is that little $sign at the bottom of the chat log. And if you click on that, you can send me money, and it will pin your comment to the chat log. So if there's something you want to, like a question you want to answer to, or if you have a request that you want me to draw, post that as a super chat, and then I'll see it in the chat, and I'll draw something for you or answer your question. Or if you don't want a question answered and you don't want anything drawn and you just want to send a few bucks my way as a thank you for doing these live streams, feel free to do that as well. It's always appreciated. HeartGem wants to see a potato wearing a unicorn horn. Potato wearing a unicorn horn. That sounds like a challenge. I'll see how far I can get from imagination here drawing a potato. This is an interesting live stream. It went from drawing a solar eclipse to drawing a potato wearing a unicorn horn. Kind of looks like a chicken nugget, but that's okay. Ain't nothing wrong with looking like a chicken nugget. See, I'm blending, as I was talking about earlier, while I'm painting. So I know potatoes have little eyes. I don't remember exactly what they look like. That kind of looks like a nipple. So might as well just look up a picture of a potato. Why not? And I can see exactly what I'm trying to draw here. I'm pretty close. So let's backtrack on the nipples a little bit here. And the color is a little off too. I mean, I know there's different colors of potatoes, so let's just fix that first. I'll do more of a golden potato. There we go. That's looking better. Put some little highlights surrounding those eyes there so that they have some three-dimensionality to them. Add a little bit of brightness to that potato to make it look more shiny. Gotta have some shiny taters. Actually, I don't want it to be too shiny down there. Okay. All right, wearing a unicorn horn. I assume it needs some sort of headband. People who are tuning in now are probably wondering what the heck is going on. It's like the title's still the same, Solar Eclipse or whatever I put in, and I'm just drawing potatoes now. That's what happens when you miss the solar eclipse. You get there late and some dude's drawing potatoes. Solar eclipses don't last forever. Make that a bit brighter. Having too much fun with this one. Okay. Now, I'm just going to, oops, clean that up a little bit. All right, now we need the unicorn horn. Being kind of quick and sloppy about this. This is hard work here, drawing unicorn horns. The office is hot. I went from having an office that was really cold all the time to having an office that's really hot all the time. Just can't win. But see, I've got lights and computers going and screens. Someone had a question about whether I have a second monitor. I have 3 monitors. Or I guess technically the Cintiq is a monitor. Or is it? It's a monitor with a tablet built in, or a tablet with a monitor built in, however you want to look at it. Trying to find the right color here for this. Looks really, really strange. Hey, it wasn't my idea. This looks like something that's gonna get flagged by YouTube. This video is gonna get taken down. I'm gonna get a strike on my record. Put some little studs here on this. So I meant to do that on its own layer, but oh well, I didn't. That's okay. And then maybe the background should have a little something. Potato, I spelled that wrong. Potato. That's how you spell potato. What am I looking for here? Looking for a brush. Let's try this one. All right, there it is. I feel like I can clean up this horn just a bit more. All right, what's next? Unicorn potato. Paduddy says wants to see a quick green eye of a human. The eyes take quite a bit of time to draw. I can try to do one fast. That's an odd drawing there. You know, I was gonna draw the eye. I'm gonna skip the eye because thinking about it now, I actually have a tutorial you can watch on how to draw an eye, and so all I'd really be doing is just drawing a much quicker version of that, which wouldn't look nearly as good. So check out that video on my channel, how to draw an eye. The eyes and the potato. I'm going to leave the potato alone. I don't want to come back to that. I'm done with that potato. What else you got for me? Let's draw something else. I'm up to the challenge. I'll hang out as long as I can until I overheat and pass out from heat exhaustion, which is going to be in probably less than 30 minutes. The Blocky Heroes here. What's up, the Blocky? I'll just look through and see if there's any other. Somebody wanted me to draw anime. Not really that great at drawing anime because it's just not really my thing. So I'm gonna pass on that one. An owl, somebody suggested. Horse, Bigfoot, motorcycle, a basketball with less air. Someone wants to buy my Eclipse. Did I see it? No, I did not. I did not see. But I don't know if I'll make prints of that. I mean, you can definitely contact me and let me know what it is that you would like. Might be able to make it happen. Bigfoot. I'll draw Bigfoot. Really quick Bigfoot. That's a terrible leg there. I'll fix that. I might have this one not so far in front. It doesn't look like he's doing the splits. It should work all right. It's gonna look like Chewbacca probably. I've never seen Bigfoot personally, and I'm thinking Bigfoot probably does not exist. It's hard to say, because you know, anything could exist, but I'm guessing probably not. Again, I'm just blending in color here. Now, I think I talked earlier about how I usually create layers when I'm painting. Sometimes I don't, and when I don't, it's usually because I want to be able to work faster. In this case, you'll notice I'm not using a whole lot of layers, and I'm using this one brush called Smooth Palette Knife, which kind of blends color while you paint. So it saves you a bit of time. You don't have to switch back and forth between a blender and a brush that adds paint. I could use a bunch of layers, it's just if I took that approach to this painting, then I would be spending a lot more time on it. Time that I do not have today. Agile Bigfoot, says Donna. Hidodi wants to see a potato in his hand. Micro wants to know what's the hardest object or scene for me to paint. I don't know if there's anything that I would consider to be hard. I mean, some things are harder than others, and you know, they're usually more complex things like machines and things like that. You know, somebody said paint a motorcycle. You know how long it would take me to paint a motorcycle? I don't know anything about motorcycles, so that's kind of the part of the problem. I think if you know a lot about the subject, it's easier to draw. Things that are just really complex, things that are in perspective and things like that, just require so much more effort. So I don't know if I can really, off the top of my head, think of anything that's too hard to draw. I mean, I can say there's some things that I like to draw better than others. You know, landscapes are always easy, and still lifes are easy. Portraits are a little bit harder because you have to really worry about making it look like the person and not offending anybody by doing a bad drawing of them. I don't know what I'm trying to do with the face here. I don't really know what Bigfoot's face looks like. I don't know if he's supposed to be a man or an ape or... And there's Harry and the Hendersons. Looks kind of more like an ape. It's about as far as my Bigfoot knowledge goes. Harry and the Hendersons. Kind of a freaky looking thing here. Blocky here wants to know how often do I draw. I would say daily, but not every day. So, you know, most days out of the week I'm drawing. Or at least doing something creative. Because I'm not always drawing every day, but I draw quite a bit. Head's kind of big. I feel like maybe, if I want to be picky about this Bigfoot, I need to shrink the head a bit. I'm allergic to Bigfoot. Really just making this up as I go along. Make him a little shaggier. Oops, I need to merge that head layer down so I can actually paint on it. Michelle says looks like my ex. I'm just being kind of quick about this. Sloppy Bigfoot. This is kind of a fun one to draw. I'm just kind of outlining him in black a little bit too, just because it helps him stand out. I think that's probably about as good of a Bigfoot as I can draw in a short period of time. I don't know why he has that haircut, but he does. It'll make his eyes like more mysterious. There we go. Not that all big feet are necessarily angry and violent, but it's kind of the impression I get about them. Maybe I'll have to make the background a bit darker too, so it's more in context of what's going on. It's kind of shadowy, and at night that's where Bigfoot hangs out, in the darkness. Alright, there's a Bigfoot. I might even add a couple of little highlights to him. Alright, there's Bigfoot. Needs bigger feet. Alright, let's make the feet bigger. We can do that. There we go. Bigger feet. Maybe bigger hands too. Another way to make the head smaller is to use pinch. Let's make him look taller. It's too small though. Yeah, I think it looks better, a little bit smaller. There we go. Joey says, very cool. Thank you, Joey. Now I could take that Bigfoot and I could put it into my other scene. I won't do that though. So I think I'm getting pretty close to 2 hours here. I'm going to start wrapping this up, and so I will just switch back to my other painting I was working on. So we can just take a look at that. So there's the Eclipse. I might paint more of these. They may or may not be during live streams. The Eclipse happens on the 21st. It's coming up very soon. If you can check it out, if it happens to be within your line of sight, definitely do that. I wish I could check it out, but all I can do is paint it from home and pretend that I'm looking at it. So if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to my channel, because that's the best way to know when I'm live streaming or when I've scheduled a live stream, and you'll also get notifications, if you like, when I release new videos. Michelle says thanks for answering her questions. You're welcome, Michelle. Donna says thank you. You're welcome, Donna. If there's a couple more last minute questions, I'm happy to answer those. Got a painting and then two little doodles done. That was pretty fun. Black and White Drawing is here. What's up, Black and White Drawing? And I'll plug it just again, but there is the Super Chat button in the bottom of your chat log there. It's a little $sign. Click on that if you're so kind, and send a little bit of money my way if you enjoyed this live stream, because that's really incentive for me to do more live streams like this. And it helps support all the great free content that I release here on YouTube. You can also check out patreon.com/AaronRutten. There's a little link for that down there. That's a way to support my channel, and you get all kinds of great goodies that aren't available to the public. I'm just going to look back at the other paintings too. I've already forgotten what the potato looked like. Oh yeah, it's kind of like a chicken McNugget. It's a chicken McNugget that's going to go LARPing. Donna sees no button. I don't know if it's different if you're on a phone or not. So maybe it's not there. I don't know. It's there on mine. I know people have used it before, but it could be that depending on how you're watching the live stream, maybe there is no super chat. But Patreon will work instead. And Al's going to check out Patreon. So Patreon's actually you get more bang for your buck through Patreon, and it's all helping to support my channel. But if you like these tutorials that I put out and you want to get access to like exclusive videos, there's lots of stuff on there that's only available to patrons. My workspace and all of these brushes are also available to patrons as well. Alright, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and call this a day. Thanks everybody for watching. I had a lot of fun painting along with you. I don't know exactly when I'm going to do my next live stream. It probably will be next Friday around the same time. So we can, maybe tentatively plan for that. But like I mentioned before, if you're subscribed to my channel, or if you follow me on Facebook and Twitter and all that stuff, I'll give you a little bit of heads up that way when I've scheduled a live stream. So thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks for all your wonderful suggestions, and I'll see you next time.